Hi, and welcome to this instructional video on CATIA. Today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at the CATIA machining workbench, the Prismatic Machining Workbench. This is your first video on this, so the very first thing that one has to do when you use any workbench is to get yourself set up as far as your options go. So we're going to spend a little bit of time looking at the options that are needed to be set up for you to effectively use the Prismatic Machining Workbench. So let's go ahead and start doing that. You may have a part already modeled, a design created on a workpiece, as you can see here. It's not really important when you set up your options. If you have a part open, the options get saved in your profile, so it's fine if you don't have your part open. But right now we do have a part here. So let's go ahead and go straight over to the Options tool, which is under the Tools menu item. And if we slide downwards, select on Options. This here is our Options dialog. You're probably familiar with this from your earlier CAD classes. One of the things you should always do when you go into CATIA, regardless of whether you're in the machining, doing a machined part or CAD, is you want to set your units. So again, under the general group here, you have parameters and measure. Select this. Let's go to your units, and we'll be exclusively working in imperial units in inches in this class. So your machining, everything you want to come out of the CATIA machining modules should be in inches in your G&M code. So you want to make sure, of course, that this is set to inches. Now there are a number of other parameters that you need to set for your machining output to be correct. And for us to do this, we need to scroll down through this parameter list and look for a few other things. The one that I want to look for is linear feed rate. Here it is, and this is the feed rate of your machine. So that's your F code, which, as you know, is in inches per minute. So make sure it's set to inches per minute. There are a number of different options here. Inches per minute, as you can see displayed here. The angular feed rate, we like this set in inches per turn, as you can see. And again, there are a bunch of options here, so make sure you select inches per turn. The linear spindle speed, this is your surface feet per minute. So as you can see here, it's foot per minute, surface feet per minute. And again, there are a couple of options. Make sure it's in foot per minute. And your angular spindle speed, this is your RPM. This is what's going to be in your S code. You want this to be turns per minute, or RPM. So these are the main options that you want to set to make sure that when you generate your G&M code, the units come out correct. Obviously, you don't want your RPM to be in radians, radians per minute or radians per second. You want them to be in revolutions per minute. So it's really important that you set these. Now these are saved in your profile, so you should not have to reset these once you set them. Once you log out of CATIA or exit from CATIA, once you run CATIA again, these values should be set. Just a couple of other things to point out to you. You probably may have already done this, but normally, of course, you're going to be designing parts before you machine them. It's a good idea to have your sketcher set up correctly. So if you click on the mechanical design option here and go down to your sketcher entry, one of the things that's really important in your sketcher is your grid. So do make sure that's displayed, and then make sure your primary spacing, I typically use an inch, and I use 10 graduations, each graduation then being 100,000ths of an inch. It's good to have this set up. Every time you go into the sketcher, you have the grid properly set up. Do not select the snap to point, otherwise you will not be able to position points as you draw profiles or lines other than at grid intersection points. So leave this unselected. So that's the grid. The other thing that you might be that you need to be mindful of is under the drafting entry here. You're going to have to, towards the end of the term, do a drawing of your clock face with the engraving on it. So it's important that you can get to the templates where you can set up your frame and title block. So under the drafting option here, there's a bunch of tabs on the top. The one that you have to go to is the Layout tab. And make sure that the directory there's a directory listed here for frame and title block. Now my directory might be a little different from what you see displayed because what I am running on here is a 64-bit version of CATIA. So if you look at this path, there is win_64 as part of it. You may not see that. What's important is that this is B21, that's the version of CATIA that we're using right now, version 21, and that you have after this part of the path you have VB script frame title block / and this is the directory in which all those templates that you use for doing your frame and title block are stored. So it's important that you have this properly identified. Other than that, there isn't too much else that you really need to play around with as far as the mechanical design settings go. We do, however, have to go and set some options under the machining settings. So if you close up the mechanical design and scroll downwards, you see in the tree here there is your machining settings. I'm going to select this. There are a bunch of tabs up here, as you'd expect. The very first tab is your General tab, and what this shows you here are the colors that the machining module uses, the Prismatic Machining and the other machining modules use to show different things. These colors here highlight different types of geometry that are used in machining. For example, you have bottoms and parts, you have islands, for example, when you machine around a pad in a pocket, for example, and each of these things are colored differently. I wouldn't recommend you change these, but it may be a good place to come if you're unsure about what the colors mean as you're using the Prismatic Machining Workbench. Now if you scroll down a bit, you'll also see down on the bottom here different colors for your toolpaths. So you'll see that green means the toolpath is machining, so you're actually cutting. Red is rapid, approach is yellow, and so on. So again, if you ever forget what your colors mean when you see the toolpaths generated, you can always come to the machining options, select General, and then use your scroll bar to see the colors. We do have to set a few things here, so I'm going to move over now to the Resources tab. And you have to make sure that this first field here is properly set up to your startup directory. Again, if you look at this, my machine, because it's a 64-bit machine or implementation of CATIA, I have this. You may have something different in this spot here, but again, what's important is B21 and startup. Now later on, you may find that as our releases change, we may go to version 22, version 23. Bear in mind that this should match the version. If you have to change this, what you can do is select on this Select Directory button, and it pops up this browser which allows you to browse through the directory where these files are. Now as you can see here, this is set to the C drive. If I slide down, the next folder that's selected is program files. This is the folder in which all the programs are stored on your computer. Dassault Systems, that's the company that's responsible for CATIA. That's the next level that we go into. B21, that's the version of CATIA. Win_B64, as I said, this might be a little bit different for you because again, I'm using a 64-bit machine. And then the next folder that's selected is Startup. So if by chance your path is not set correctly here, you should follow pretty much that structure to get to the Dassault folder, and then work your way inwards to find the Startup folder, which has to be included here. Okay, the other thing that we need to set, now that we've set our primary path to where all the machining resource files are going to be, I need to go over here to the Output tab. And up here is really important. This is where we select the post processor that is used for converting our CATIA generated toolpaths into the correct GNM code to match with the machines we have in our lab. So it's really important for you to select the correct post processor. We use the IMS class of post processors, so you need to make sure that this button here is checked off, And this should automatically be correct, this path to where the post-processor files are located. Again, B21, again, this is the 64-bit processor part of the path. This has to terminate on the manufacturing folder within the startup folder. And again, if you have trouble, if this doesn't match up, or if this is blank, for example, you would have to come and navigate to that location. And again, the same instructions I mentioned a few minutes ago apply. You just have to go into the manufacturing folder. The other thing that's important here would be, once you've set your correct post-processor and then the path to where the post-processor files are, is you may want to come down here and make sure that when you generate your toolpath files that it's stored in the same location as the cat process file. Cat process files are equivalent to cat part files, but that's where you store your machining toolpaths. And when you generate your GNM code, it's a good idea to keep those at the same location, at least for what we're doing in this class. There are reasons, of course, where you may want it in a different location, but we're not going to move it around. The other thing that's important here is the extension of the GNM code file that you generate. You can put a different type of extension in. I recommend TXT. The reason being is that those files are easy to open by double-clicking on them. They automatically default to the Notepad text editor, so you don't have to spend a lot of time trying to find the correct application to open them. So these are the things that one needs to set as far as your machining applications go. And I'm going to hit OK here. And the last thing we're going to talk about as far as setup goes, since you're going to be using the machining application quite a bit, sometimes it's a good idea to set these up so you can get to them easily. If you go over here to the Start menu, all your machining workbenches are located in here. We're going to be working with the Prismatic Machining Workbench. It's actually not that hard to get to it, but there's this Start menu here where you can place workbenches that you use very frequently up here. To do this, what you would need to do is go to your Tools menu again, under Customize, and this shows you here again a bunch of tabs. This is the Start menu tab, and this list here corresponds to the list that I had, the 3 workbenches that I had at the start of the Start menu. So if I want to add a new workbench, what I would have to do is move down or scroll down to the list, find the workbench that I want. So I'm looking for my Prismatic Machining Workbench, and then clicking the arrow to the right, I add this to my Start menu. So you can add any workbench that you want to the Start menu. And as I said, if I hit close here, you'll see now that that workbench is located at the top. So it saves you a little bit of time, and it's also maybe useful because sometimes you may forget, particularly if you're using very hard to find workbenches or workbenches that you don't use that commonly. You may forget where they are, so it may be a good idea to put them up here. Okay, so that's in a nutshell the setup that you need to do, the options that you need to set up before you even start doing any work within the Prismatic Machining Workbench.